Good evening, good evening. We have visitors with us and grateful for your presence. I've had the unique privilege of making a few trips over to the Middle East. This last one was in Greece and Turkey. So this evening what we're going to do is take a few minutes and look at the steps of Paul and John, primarily Paul's second and third journey. And while we're on that second and third journey, we're also going to look at the seven churches of Asia and the letter that's written there in Revelation. So on this map, you'll see this map includes Paul's first, second, third journey and also his voyage to Rome. I have been able to, just by pure blessing and privilege to be able to go to these places. I've been to Rome, down through Sicily, Caesarea here where Paul would have been put on a ship and sent off to prison, and then this last trip was able to go through some of these areas. So young people, I guess the main thing I want to tell you is when people try to discredit the Bible and try to say these are fairy tales and this is made up, we can go to real places. We can stand where these events took place. They can get very specific on the dates. There's all kind of evidence of the people that lived there, of Paul's, every place, evidence of Paul being there. So the people that try to discredit the Bible, when they try to do that, they owe you something. They owe you an explanation. If that's false, everything that we can see in these areas, they owe you the truth, and the burden is on them. Because there's nothing like standing in some of these places and reading what happened as you stand here and read about that event. So what I'm going to try to do this evening is try to take you with me as we went on this tour through Turkey and Greece and some of the things that Paul went through and also those letters. Now, I want to bring to mind this. As Paul's on his third journey, when we read in Revelations 2 and 3, the seven churches of Asia, those seven churches are located here. So as we were in that area, we were able to make our way through and visit these cities. Maybe not that church, but we were in the city. The church was in that area somewhere. So we'll go through that. I want to call to mind, as we were on the tour, Leon Malden called out this point that I never thought of. Galatians 4:4 and also Ephesians 1:10 talks about the fullness of time had come. This road is the road that leads from Troas to Assos. And one point that Leon brought out when he talks of the fullness of time had come and God's wisdom, it was time for the gospel to be spread. And roads like this made it much easier for the apostles, for the disciples, for people to travel, and also seafaring. And we noticed that in that map of Paul traveling by sea. Seafaring was much easier. So Leon brought at that point, the fullness of time had come. It was the time for the gospel to be spread. And it was much more convenient for that apostle or that disciple to travel, because you notice the road's much better than on either side and how rough that terrain would have been. So I thought it was very interesting to stand there and know that, God's wisdom. It was time for the gospel to be spread. And these roads are just miles and miles. It's amazing what the Roman Empire had done in building roads, connecting cities. So very, very impressive. This is Paul's second missionary journey. Now his journey starts in Antioch here. He was forbidden to go into Asia, so you see how he went up to the top, and you can read that account in Acts 15:16 is where you'll find that account where he was forbidden to go into Asia. So that's why you see that loop up and around. His third missionary journey, he goes into Asia, and then that's, of course, you're going to see where he goes through here, back to Ephesus, and comes near those seven churches of Asia. Acts 15:36 is where the second missionary journey starts. And this is where they had, of course, you recall that confrontation between Paul and Barnabas over John Mark. And they come to this heated disagreement, and Paul decides to take Silas with him. So this is where the second missionary journey is going to start, and Paul decides he wants to go back and visit some of those churches and see how they are doing. So this is where the second missionary journey is going start, and it's going to start right over here at Antioch. So he'll start here, and they have their confrontation. He's going to pick up Timothy here in Lystra. So they're heading out on their second missionary journey. And we'd like to call to mind, Dathan did a lesson on Timothy back earlier this year. I think it was in February. Donnie had done lessons on Lydia, the Philippian jailer, and also on Paul this year. So if you want to go back and look at more specifics, because we're not going to get very deep into that this evening. So passing by Mysia, they came down to Troas. So this is the ancient city of Troas. Here is where, if you remember that, the Macedonian call would have been where Paul received this Macedonian call from this man in his vision to come over to Macedonia and help us. And that's in Acts chapter 16. And he has this vision to appear to him while he is in Troas. So try to bring you to this point as we're in Troas. As they were leaving, it's very possible, this is the harbor road to be going down to the harbor, and it's very possible that, of course, Paul, Silas, and Timothy would have walked this very road, headed down to the harbor to leave Troas. And to sit and read that just is, it's very rich to be able to do that. This is looking out from Troas out to the sea. They may have went another route, but you get the idea. They were in this area, and this could have been the harbor that was there that day that they would have sailed out of. So they come to Philippi. Everybody knows the stories there in Philippi. Lydia baptized in Philippi. So Paul enters, and the first thing Paul's going to see when he comes in is this theater. And one thing that comes to Paul's mind, I think it almost has to come to Paul's mind, is he thinks about when he was persecuting Christians, and maybe the stories of the persecution that happened to Christians during this time. In Rome, the theater there, the Colosseum in Rome, has very elaborate alleyways that run beneath the floor of the Colosseum. Those alleyways were used to shuttle the wild beasts through that would be released on Christians, or maybe even the gladiators. And here we come into Philippi. They have those same kind of alleyways running under, and I couldn't help but think, did Paul go back and think about the persecution that he was guilty of against Christians? And more alleyways around that theater, and this little grate here at the bottom right of the screen, that was where either the actors would come out, or either the lions or tigers or whatever they were turning loose on the gladiators or the Christians would have come out. And in Rome, on the bottom of that Colosseum was a very elaborate system of alleyways and tunnels. So that's one thing that I thought about as I went through of just what Christians might have went through. He goes on through Philippi, and we read the story. We pick up here with the story of Lydia when she's being baptized. And this is the little town called Lydia. It's what they named it. And we come down to the river, and this is the area that supposedly this baptism of Lydia took place. Was in this area, and they've set up this nice area. And you also can you can come right down into here, and they've got it set up with steps where people can be baptized. Apologize for some of the pictures, but I have to get the picture when I have the opportunity, because we're moving on all the time. So I can't wait for everybody to get out and try to get a perfect snapshot, so I apologize for that. But this is that place where that would happen. And Lydia and her household were baptized. And as mentioned, Donnie did a thorough lesson on this if you want to go back and listen to it. But this would have been the place that happened. Specific place, people. So lots of evidence there. This is a little church, little cathedral that was built in 1974. And you kind of see it's depicting Paul being blinded on the road to Damascus here. And they go on, and also in the floor of it, it's a mosaic all the way through this little cathedral that showed Paul's missionary journeys in mosaics on the floor. Very impressive. That just the work and the time of creating these mosaics, because each and every, all these little squares, all little hand-cut pieces of stone laid in the floors. And you can imagine the time and effort. So when we're talking about Lydia, we're going to jump from Lydia over to Thyatira, one of these 7 churches, but it's just a good point because she has ties to this church. And when we think about that, we think about the dates when Paul would have kind of been coming through this area, when he would have been baptizing Lydia. You take that date, 49 to 51, Revelations 2 and 3, somewhere around 95 AD. These dates can vary. But you think about Lydia from this town, familiar with people there, Paul familiar with her, and some 40 years later, I've been here over 30 years, so, blink of an eye, I'll be here 40. And Lydia, knowing about this church, maybe knowing some of these people. And then this letter that John writes, talking about that church being corrupt in Thyatira. And these are pictures from that city. That God knows their works, love, faith, patience. Nevertheless, He has those few things against them because they allow that woman Jezebel, who calls herself a prophetess, to teach and seduce my servants, commit sexual immorality, eat things sacrificed to idols. Idolatries everywhere in that region. I gave her time to repent of her sexual immorality, and she did not. So you can imagine Lydia thinking about this town where she was from, and maybe even knowing some of these people. I will cast her into a sick bed, and those who commit adultery with her into great tribulation, unless they repent of their deeds. And just how sad if Lydia was around and was able to read this letter, her feelings about, where she was from, and maybe some of her close relatives and friends would have been here. I will kill her children with death, and all the churches shall know that I am He who searches the minds and hearts. Now I'll say to you and to the rest in Thyatira, as many as do not have this doctrine, who have not known the depths of Satan, as it say, I will put on you no other burden, but hold fast what you have till I come. So that's the church, the city of Thyatira, and that church that would have been there. Lydia very possibly was familiar with. Now we'll go back into Philippi here and pick up there. I'm going to grab the 7 churches of Asia. It's kind of, I would see that maybe in Paul's journey, trying to tie that together for us. So they go back into Corinth, and this is where this girl with the spirit of divination greatly annoys Paul. He becomes greatly annoyed with her and casts that demon out of her. And then the men of the city, frustrated with Paul, they lay many stripes on them, talking about Paul and Silas, and they throw them into prison. I'll go back to that slide of the theater. In 2 Timothy 4, Paul talks about being delivered from the mouth of a lion. Now, a lot of commentators are going to say that Paul would not have been subjected to the mouth of a lion because he is a Roman citizen. Well, I beg to differ, because here Paul was beaten and flogged. There was other times Paul was severely beaten even though he was a Roman citizen. So could he be, conjecture on my part, he could have been subject to being fed to the lions, but even if it wasn't a lion, he felt like he was being fed to a lion if it was Nero, as some would say. But I couldn't help as some of the commentators say, oh, that wouldn't happen to Paul because he's a Roman citizen. Well, some bad things happened to Paul, and right here's one of them, that he was beaten and thrown into prison. So you can imagine if you're standing in this spot, one of them would try to bring you to this spot that at midnight Paul and Silas are praying, singing hymns to God. And this is supposedly that cell where they would have been bound. And then the earthquake happens. And then the jailer's, ready to commit suicide. And Paul says, don't do yourself no harm. We're here. We are all here. And it goes on into that story. The jailer brought them into his house. He set food before him, rejoiced in believing in God with all of his household. And then he would have brought, it's possible that the jailer lived somewhere in this area, somewhere in this town, and brought him back to prison that night. And then the next morning, they're going to release Paul. I guess the magistrates had decided that, hey, we've done something wrong by imprisoning this Roman citizen. They're going to let Paul go secretly, but Paul says, no, you're not. You beat us openly. Now you come and you let us out, and let us out openly. Paul being very bold in that. So this is supposedly that where the prison would have been there in Philippi. And as we're leaving, we go by a little church building. Not sure the date of it, but in the floor you see that mosaic, and that is Paul's name there in that mosaic of that church floor. So tying Paul, some of that evidence tying Paul to that church years ago. We leave there. We don't really have an opportunity to go see anything in Thessalonica. So we kind of just go through a museum there, and then that brings us into Berea. One thing we recall what's just easily remembered about Berea, those were more fair-minded than those in Thessalonica, and they received the word with all readiness and searched the Scriptures daily to find out whether these things were so. So not much to see in Berea, but this little memorial they had set up for Paul there in Berea. So some of these cities didn't have much. So we leave there, and now we're going over into Athens. And this is where Paul would have come in and saw this city. It was given over to idols. So if you recall that, it's like Paul goes through and just the sheer size of this, I think that's, I don't know which god that would have been, Apollo maybe, I can't remember, there were so many of them. And these temples are everywhere, and you see how massive this structure is, built a couple of thousand years ago. And then from that temple, you look off the side and you see another temple down off in the valley. This was a common sight. You could be standing at one temple and look around, and easy to find another temple off in the distance, or multiple temples off into the distance. So when we talk about being given over to idols, that's the thing that Paul was battling. As he was going into these cities, and you think about being given over to idols, this was what Paul was up against, trying to go in and teach people. He goes to preaching to them about this unknown God, and they accuse him. They want to know, what's this babbler got to say? What's he got to say to us? And that's when we come to this sermon on Mars Hill. And they want to know, what is this new doctrine you speak of? Now, they were doing some construction in the area, and this is as close as we could get, but this is Mars Hill here, and that's where they would have taken Paul. This little plaque down here, this is the plaque that commemorates that sermon that Paul would have given there. And this is the view from up above it, looking down upon it. So I thought it was very interesting. This is the theater in Athens. Very impressive to see just the quality and the detail of the structures that were built so long ago with just more or less on the backs of slaves and limited types of equipment. They had the unknown gods, kids. Look at this. Unknown gods. And I think this right here could be the god Lego. No, I made that up. He moves on to Corinth in chapter 18 of Acts. And this is another city that's filled with idol worship. And as you can tell by this plaque there, that's the temple of Apollo. Off in the distance here, that's some of the temples still standing. He left Athens, went into Corinth, and here's that temple of Aphrodite up on the top of a mountain. So again, when Paul's coming into these cities trying to fight the idol worship, you can see that it's prevalent among all the people. He continues there about 1 year and 6 months, and then you recall this account where Paul is preaching to them, and then with this one accord, they revolted against Paul and brought him to the judgment seat, saying, "This fellow persuades men to worship God contrary to the law." Well, Gallio was proconsul of Achaia at that time, and this is the judgment seat called the Bema, plaque on the side of that, and that's where they would have taken Paul and listened to his claim. And then when we're in Delphi, this inscription in the little red square is where it notes Gallio and being the proconsul at that time. So kind of go back to that. We can be at specific places, very specific dates, and things like this can give us specific people that were in the area. So just kind of helps us validate all these writings and the things we already know they're inspired by God and they're true. But when we have evidence like this, it just really helps to anchor our faith even more. And when people try to discredit the Bible, gives us even more ammunition to fight that battle. Go across one of the main roads. We go across the road, and we read about Erastus being the treasurer of the city in Romans 16:23. And this little stone here is a kind of a recognition stone to Erastus. Just across the road, that's the main city of Corinth, and this is that temple of Aphrodite here. The recognition stone for Erastus there. More excavation needs to be done, and you can imagine if you look, and I'll call to mind the tail. You remember Donnie's lesson on Colossae when he showed you that tail? This is what's going to be probably under the tail, all right? When they start the excavation, they'll start finding things like this buried beneath the dirt. We see that everywhere. Once they start the excavation, pulling things, they just keep exposing more structures. And that's kind of a close-up of the recognition stone for Erastus. And then Acts 19:22 mentions him, and in Galatians 16:23 again mentions him about being the treasurer of the city. So more of those specifics. Paul leaves Corinth and he stops by Ephesus here. It's just a short stop, and he's leaving Corinth here. So we've made a real quick trip up through Troas. There's Philippi. Come through Thessalonica, Berea, through Athens, and at Corinth. And he comes over, makes a quick stop there at Ephesus, and now he's making his way back down to Jerusalem, and then his journey will end in Antioch. So that kind of winds up that second journey of Paul. Now, keep in mind, he spent 1 year and 6 months in Corinth, so this would have been, there had been much, this journey would have taken a couple of years at least, or longer. I don't know, remember the specific dates, but you just know that it's quite a bit of time we just went through. So on this map, and most Bibles will have these maps in the back. So here we pick up the third journey. We're going to start again in Antioch. This map shows Acts 19:1 is the beginning, but I think close study may show that kind of really starts about chapter 18, verse 23. So he will leave there. And this is conjecture on my part. As he leaves there, Lystra and Derbe, he mentions those, talks about those in Acts 14:6. Well, there's no mention of him stopping here, but I can only imagine as Paul's traveling this, that he wouldn't stop there on this journey. Even though we don't have a record, I just think that he might. And that little blue bar, that's 50 miles. The average man can walk, you're probably going from 20 to 30 miles. It just depends on how long he walks, how fast. But you can imagine if he's coming through, he's going to need lodging and possibly food. So I could see Paul very possibly stopping at some of these towns and visiting them. And he would also may have some association with these 7 churches of Asia. That's why I'm kind of pulling them into this study, because it's possible that he would have had some close association with these. And I'm thinking that, if Paul's coming through, that maybe he's going to stop at Laodicea, Philadelphia, Sardis before he gets to Ephesus. It's possible, or he had some type of association, communication with these people. Now, I call to mind, as we're studying Colossae, in the end of that book, you're going to hear about these 2 cities. Now, they can almost be seen from one town to the other. That's how close they are. So keep that in mind. Now we're going to go on into Laodicea, because as we're moving through, I think that's a good time. Neighboring cities, as mentioned. Now, Hierapolis was nearby, known for its hot springs. Now you notice in this picture, that's a hot spring. There's steam coming off both of those springs. Now this man-made channels, thousands of feet of these channels would reach up into the mountains and bring cool water down. So when we think about Laodicea, I know your works that you are neither hot or cold. This is that, how he ties that with them. The cold water springs. Colossae was known for cold water springs. They were bringing cold water springs out of the mountains. So that would have been where you get that. You're neither cold nor hot. The water would have gotten down, and if it was mixed up, it would have been lukewarm, full of minerals, and they wouldn't want it as drinking water. So the condemnation on them you're lukewarm, you're neither hot or cold, and God says, I'm going to vomit you out of my mouth. And this would have been that town of Laodicea. He said, I counsel you to buy gold, refined in fire, that you'll be rich, white garments, that you may be clothed, the shame of your nakedness not be revealed, and anoint your eyes with eye salve. Laodicea was known for a high-quality eye salve. And we go on to Philadelphia. They're called the Faithful Church. Not much here to see. And again, apologize for the photography, but I had to get the picture by the chain link fence. It's the only way I could get that picture of Philadelphia, and I like to do that as I go. So Philadelphia was right there, right after Laodicea, and very possible into Sardis after that. But Faithful Church, they have little strength, but they kept my word, not denied my name. Because you have kept my command to persevere, and I keep you from the hour of trial, which will come to the whole world to test those who dwell on it. So that's that church to Philadelphia. And then here in Sardis, a very old crane that they would have brought in years ago to help. They would use it to try to place some of these stones back into their original position. You can see where they had been moving some here years and years ago. So excavation and improvement's been happening for years. Strengthen the things which remain that are ready to die. That condemnation on Sardis, that you've got something remaining. So take what little you've got and use that before it's dead. You have a few names, even in Sardis, who have not defiled their garments. He comes on into Ephesus. Ephesus is a pretty large city and very seems to be a very modern look to it compared to some of the others. He passes by Ephesus again, and he comes to it on his third journey. Comes back and he spends more time here. And he comes in and he's preaching to some of them and teach, but they did not believe, and they spoke evil of the way, and they departed from them, withdrew the disciples, and then he comes into what's called the school of Tyrannus. And supposedly this is the area where that school would have been, was in this area. And I couldn't help but think about when it says there that all who dwelt in Asia heard the word of the Lord, both Jew and Greek. And that's where I kind of take those 7 churches of Asia and I bring all them together on this trip, because it's possible that that interaction was happening between Paul and those 7 churches at this time. What's the condemnation of Ephesus? The loveless church. They had lost their first love. They had left their first love. And that was condemnation on Ephesus. Leave Ephesus, and about a couple of miles away, this is the tomb of John, the Apostle John. It was very sad to see that. I've been able to go through the Sistine Chapel and see their memorials for Peter, and seen the basilica where Paul is buried, and this is what they've got for John. It's very sad. The disciple whom Jesus loved. And this is where his grave lays. So it goes on through. Now we've leaving Ephesus. Paul might have went up to Smyrna. What's the letter say to Smyrna? I know your works, tribulation and poverty, but you are rich. I know the Jews are the synagogue of Satan. Do not fear those things which you're about to suffer. The devil is about to throw some of you into prison, that you may be tested, and you will have tribulation 10 days. Be faithful unto death, and I will give you the crown of life. And then we go to Pergamos. That's a compromising church. I know your works and where you dwell, where Satan's throne is. Hold fast to my name and do not deny my faith. I have a few things against you, because you have those who hold the doctrine of Balaam, and that's the condemnation against Pergamos there that John wrote. Acts 26, chapter 20, verse 6 and 7. It's when we come back into Troas, and this is a very familiar story to us, because this is, where we get our example for partaking of the Lord's Supper. So they come back to Troas here, and they wait there. And also the story of Eutychus. When Paul is preaching, he falls out of the window, and he's raised from the dead. That would have happened on this journey back into Troas. So we were back into Troas on the third journey, was there on the second journey. So Paul departed Macedonia, and so we're back up into this area. So we've kind of made this quick trip through here, around Corinth, Athens, and now we're coming back. And the men there waited for him at Troas. And you can see there how close Troas and Assos is. And then we go on into Assos, and here they were intending to take Paul on board here at Assos as he'd given orders, but Paul wanted to walk from Assos to Troas. And one thing that as we were there that Leon brought out, these were some of Paul's last days as a free man on this time period right here. And when he talks about he sent them on and he went on foot between Troas and Assos, we're looking at about 3 or 3.5 weeks. It's all Paul has left of him being truly a free man. He has a little freedom in Rome, but not freedom like he has when he's walking this road. And that just, it's something that just kind of brings it all to life, that Paul would have walked this road meditating and thinking about his freedoms are going to be gone. He's chains and tribulations await me, is what he says. So he goes on, and after he leaves there, so we're up in here, Troas, Assos, he comes on down, and he ends his journey down here in Jerusalem. And him knowing what awaited him, he went on, did not delay. This is from the 2019 trip I made to the Holy Lands. And this is the area where Paul would have stood before Festus, Felix, and Agrippa. Would have been in this area. And that's the theater, very possible, where he would have been stating his claim. And one of these areas, there's a few little rooms in this area, and they reconstructed it, but supposedly this is where he would have been held in prison during that time he was waiting to be sent to Rome. And there's a little plaque there talking about Paul. He appealed unto Caesar, and Festus, when he had conferred with the council, answered and says, Hast thou appealed unto Caesar? Unto Caesar you shall go. And then this is the last journey, his fourth journey as he leaves Caesarea here to go up to Rome. And so he makes that trip. Paul makes that trip here and ends up in Rome. And we were able to take that. This trip right here was last year, and actually follow this route from Syracuse up through Three Taverns, Epiphorum, and back up into Rome, and see where Paul would have traveled to get there. And this is the Maritimium prison where Paul would have been held down below, and that's the prison cell supposedly where he was held. He was in prison about 2 years there in Rome, and then they beheaded him. And the story goes that they beheaded him and they took his head far away from his body because they were afraid that he would come back to life. They really were. What a brave, foolish soul to put a man to death and you think he can come back to life and you're still going to kill him. I don't know if brave or foolish, both maybe. Don't know. But that's his tomb there. Much better than John's, but not near the spectacle as Peter's. Apostle Paul said in Acts 15, 20 and 21, I've made it my aim to preach the gospel not where Christ was named, lest I should build on another man's foundation. And that commitment he made, he meant it. That man traveled 3,200 miles, roughly 3,200 miles on foot, and another roughly 3,200 miles by sea, fulfilling this commitment. So when he said that, that's my aim, he meant it, didn't he? He really did mean it. So appreciate your attention this evening with that, and I hope I was able to take you on my journey there and show you some of those highlights. It's one of those trips, if you can ever get the opportunity to make that trip, there's nothing better in a trip than on-site Bible study, where you can open your Bible and you can study from the Scriptures the things that happened right there where you're standing. You'll be enlightened beyond imagination. You'll never read some of these stories the same. They'll be stuck in your mind forever. Some of those images will come back to you as you read through them. not easily forgotten. If you're here this evening, you haven't obeyed the gospel, you got sin in your life that you need to correct, now's the time. We're not promised another day, not another hour, not another minute. So if you're subject to the invitation, we would ask you come as we stand and sing.